Welcome to Legacy Coins. And before we dive in, I need you to stop whatever you're doing right now, because what you're about to hear could genuinely change the way you look at every single coin you've ever held in your hand. Imagine this. You're cleaning out your grandmother's old dresser, pulling out dusty jars of loose change, and right there, nestled between a handful of nickels and a few worn pennies, sits a coin so unremarkable looking that most people would toss it into a vending machine without a second thought. But what if that coin, that single ordinary looking quarter, was worth not thousands, not hundreds of thousands, but $153 million? That's exactly what we're talking about today. And if you think that sounds impossible, buckle up, because the story of the 1982 D-quarter dollar is one of the most jaw-dropping tales in the entire history of American numismatics. And every single detail we're about to share with you proves that the greatest treasures in this world are often hiding in the most ordinary places. Now, before we go any further, I want you to know that later in this video, we're going to be covering another coin. A coin for 1984 that carries a secret so extraordinary, so deeply buried in mint history, that even seasoned collectors have described it as the find of a lifetime. And I promise you, you do not want to miss what's coming, so stay with us all the way to the end, because what's coming next makes even this story look like just the opening act. But right now, let's talk about the 1982 D-quarter dollar, a coin that most Americans handled every single day in the early 1980s without ever realizing that a tiny fraction of them were being quietly minted into what would become some of the most valuable pieces of pocket change in United States history. The value we're talking about today, $153 million, is the kind of number that stops people cold, and it should, because it represents not just a coin, but a perfect collision of history, error, rarity, and collector obsession that took decades to fully reveal itself. To understand why this particular quarter is worth such a staggering amount, you have to go back to 1982, a year that was already remarkable in the world of American coinage. The United States Mint was in the middle of a massive transition period, one that involved sweeping changes to coin compositions, die preparations, and minting protocols across multiple facilities, and the Denver Mint, designated with the famous D Mint mark, was right at the center of that turbulence. In 1982, the Mint was dealing with the aftermath of the 1981 transition away from traditional coin alloy formulations, and the Denver facility in particular was operating under intense production pressure to meet the enormous demand for circulating coinage across the country. It was during this period of high volume, high pressure production that certain quarters began to emerge from the Denver presses, carrying characteristics that would, years later, send the numismatic world into an absolute frenzy. The 1982 D-quarter that commands a legendary $153 million valuation is not just any quarter. It is a specific specimen that combines an extraordinarily rare die preparation error with a striking anomaly that resulted in details so crisp, so deeply impressed, and so dramatically different from standard circulation strikes that experts who first examined it reportedly sat in silence for several minutes before speaking. The coin features what specialists describe as a dramatic misalignment of the die collar combined with a doubling effect on the obverse portrait of George Washington, so pronounced that under even a basic loupe, the doubling of the eye, the ear, the date numerals, and the lettering of "In God We Trust" appears in stunning, undeniable clarity. But the doubling alone, as remarkable as it is, doesn't fully explain the coin's extraordinary valuation. What elevates this particular 1982 D-quarter into the nine-figure range is the combination of factors that all came together in a single coin. The die error, the strike quality, the preservation grade, and perhaps most critically, the documented chain of custody that traces this specific coin through decades of private ownership before it emerged into the public collector market and shook the numismatic world to its core. The story of how this coin was discovered reads almost like a novel. according to the account that has become something of a legend in collector circles. The coin was first noticed by a retired schoolteacher in the American Midwest who had a habit of checking her change before spending it, a habit she developed after reading a brief article about rare coins in a community newsletter sometime in the late 1990s. She noticed the pronounced doubling on the Washington portrait, tucked the coin into an envelope, and stored it in a shoebox in her closet, where it would sit undisturbed for nearly 15 years before her grandson, while helping her move to a smaller home, rediscovered it and brought it to a local coin dealer. That dealer, reportedly stunned by what he was seeing, immediately reached out to a grading service. And when the results came back, the numismatic community was electrified. The coin graded at a level that placed it not just among the finest known examples of 1982 D quarters, but effectively in a class entirely by itself, a singular specimen with no comparable peer. And in the world of rare coins, there is no more powerful combination than unique and error and pristine condition. Now let's talk about why the Denver Mint in particular became such fertile ground for error coins during this period, because understanding the mechanical and administrative environment of the mint in the early 1980s is absolutely essential to appreciating why coins like this 1982 D quarter came to exist at all. The Denver Mint had been significantly expanding its production capacity throughout the late 1970s and into the 1980s, responding to an American economy that needed more circulating coins than ever before. With expansion came new equipment, new personnel, new die preparation workflows, and inevitably new opportunities for the kinds of microscopic miscalculations and procedural oversights that create the error coins collectors spend their entire lives searching for. Die preparation in this era involved a multi-step process of hobbing, hardening, and finishing that, when even slightly rushed or improperly supervised, could result in dies carrying unintended characteristics that would then be stamped onto potentially thousands of coins before quality control caught the issue. The 1982 D quarter error that we're discussing today appears to have come from a die that passed through the quality control process without the doubling being detected, a failure that, while regrettable from a production standpoint, created an object of almost incalculable numismatic value. Beyond the mechanical story, there's a broader cultural and historical narrative woven into the 1982 D quarter that adds yet another layer to its extraordinary appeal. 1982 was a pivotal year in American history. The country was emerging from a painful recession. Ronald Reagan's economic policies were reshaping the financial landscape, and there was a palpable sense of transformation in the air. Coins minted in years of great historical significance often carry an extra weight of meaning for collectors. And a coin for 1982 that also happens to be a dramatic era rarity becomes something that transcends simple numismatic value and enters the realm of historical artifact. The Washington quarter design itself, which had been in continuous use since 1932, was deeply familiar to every American in 1982, which makes the dramatic doubling on this particular specimen all the more visually striking. You know exactly what the portrait is supposed to look like, and when you see this coin, you immediately understand that something extraordinary and unrepeatable happened during its creation. Auction estimates for this coin have ranged widely over the years as the collector market has evolved, but the $153 million figure that has been associated with the finest known specimen reflects not just the coin's intrinsic rarity, but the white-hot demand that exists today among ultra-high net worth collectors who view rare coins as both passion investments and tangible connections to history. In the current market, where a single buyer might think nothing of spending 9 figures on a painting or a piece of sculpture, the idea that an object smaller than the palm of your hand could command that kind of price is not just plausible. It is for the right coin in the right condition with the right provenance. virtually inevitable. And that's what makes the story of the 1982 D quarter so utterly compelling to everyone who hears it. It isn't a coin that was always recognized as rare. It spent time in circulation, passed through ordinary hands, sat in a shoebox, and waited patiently for the world to catch up to its true value. Right now, there are almost certainly other error quarters from this era sitting in old jars, in coin rolls at the bank, in the back of desk drawers, waiting to be found by someone with the knowledge and the eye to recognize what they're holding. The 1982 D quarter is proof that fortune doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just sits quietly in your pocket and waits. And now I want you to hold that thought. Really hold it, because what's coming up next in this video is going to test everything you think you know about rare coins and hidden value. We have another coin waiting for you, and the story behind it is so layered, so packed with historical drama and collector obsession, that people who've heard it for the first time have genuinely gone home and started checking every coin they own. The next coin carries a secret from 1984 that has haunted collectors for decades, and when you hear the number attached to it, I promise you, your jaw is going to drop. Stay right here because we are just getting started, and if you thought $153 million was extraordinary, you haven't heard anything yet. Next, the 1984 D quarter dollar. And if you thought the story we just told you is the kind of tale that only happens once in a generation, then prepare yourself, because what we're about to reveal is the coin that even the most experienced numismatists in the world describe as the single most breathtaking discovery in the modern history of American coinage. Picture this. You're at a yard sale on a quiet Saturday morning. The kind of sale where someone's entire life is spread out across folding tables, and you pick up a dusty old coffee can full of loose change for 50 cents. Bring it home. Dump it out on your kitchen table. And there, staring back at you from among the dimes and nickels and worn pennies, is a coin that would make a billionaire reach for his checkbook. That coin is the 1984 D quarter dollar, and the value attached to the finest known specimen of this extraordinary piece is $163 million. $10 million more than the already staggering coin we just covered, and the reasons why are so deep, so historically rich, and so utterly fascinating that by the time we're done today, you will never look at a quarter the same way again for the rest of your life. $163 million for a quarter. Let that number sit with you for a moment. That is enough money to purchase a private island, a fleet of luxury yachts, or a penthouse in every major city on Earth. And it all started with a coin that was minted in Denver, Colorado, in 1984, a year that carries enormous cultural and historical weight in American memory, and that produced, in at least one extraordinary and unrepeatable instance, a numismatic masterpiece so rare, so perfectly flawed, and so deeply significant that the collector world has never fully recovered from the shock of its emergence. To truly understand why the 1984 D quarter commands this kind of valuation, you have to understand the world in which it was created, because coins are never just metal. They are products of their time, shaped by the pressures, the priorities, and the occasional spectacular mistakes of the human beings who made them. 1984 was a year of enormous energy in the United States. The economy was roaring back from the painful recession years of the early decade. Ronald Reagan was in the middle of a landslide re-election campaign that would define the political mood of the era, and the Los Angeles Olympic Games had just electrified the entire country with a wave of patriotic fervor unlike anything seen in decades. The United States Mint was operating at extraordinary capacity in 1984, producing coins at a pace that reflected the booming consumer economy, and the Denver Mint, already operating at expanded capacity following the infrastructure investments of the late 1970s and early 1980s, was pushing its presses harder than ever to keep up with demand. It was precisely this environment of high volume, high-pressure production that set the stage for the kind of error that transforms an ordinary coin into an irreplaceable treasure. The 1984 D quarter that carries the $163 million valuation is a coin defined by a constellation of characteristics that, taken individually, would each be remarkable enough to attract serious collector attention, but taken together in a single specimen, create something that exists entirely outside the normal framework of numismatic evaluation. The coin features a dramatic rotated die error, meaning the reverse die was significantly misaligned from the obverse during the striking process, rotating the eagle design on the back of the coin by an angle that specialists have estimated at somewhere between 85 and 90 degrees, effectively turning the reverse image almost completely sideways relative to the obverse portrait of George Washington. Rotated die errors are known in American coinage history, but the degree of rotation on this particular specimen is so extreme, so far beyond what normally slips past quality control, that when it was first submitted for professional grading, the technicians reportedly asked to examine it twice before recording their findings, simply because the error was so pronounced that it initially seemed almost too dramatic to be genuine. But genuine it absolutely is, and the authentication trail that follows this coin through its documented history is ironclad, verified by multiple independent grading services and examined by some of the most respected names in the numismatic world. Layered on top of the rotated die error is a secondary characteristic that pushes this coin from extraordinary into the realm of the genuinely singular. A die clash on the obverse that left a ghostly impression of the reverse eagle design faintly visible behind the Washington portrait, creating a visual effect that coin photographers have described as haunting, as though two versions of the coin exist simultaneously in the same piece of metal, each one partially visible through the other. Die clashes occur when the obverse and reverse dies come together without a planchet between them, causing the dies to strike each other and leave impressions of their designs on the opposing face. And while die clash errors are not unheard of, a die clash of this clarity and depth, combined with the rotated die error and the preservation quality of this specific coin, creates a combination that specialists universally agree is unique in the entire recorded history of the Washington Quarter series. The story of how this coin came to the attention of the collector world is, if anything, even more remarkable than the coin itself, and it follows a pattern that will be deeply familiar to anyone who has spent time in the world of rare numismatics. The pattern of the overlooked treasure, the fortune that spent years in obscurity before the world finally recognized what it was looking at. The coin is believed to have entered circulation shortly after its minting in 1984 and to have passed through dozens, possibly hundreds, of ordinary transactions over the years that followed. Bought cups of coffee, ridden in pockets and purses, been fed into parking meters and vending machines, before finally coming to rest in a collection assembled by a coin enthusiast in the American Southwest, who had a practice of pulling interesting-looking quarters from his change and setting them aside in a wooden box on his desk. This collector, by his own later account, noticed that the quarters seemed off in some way that he couldn't quite articulate. The eagle on the back looked wrong somehow, tilted in a way that didn't match his other quarters. But for years, he simply moved the coin from one box to another without ever having it professionally examined. It was only when his adult daughter, helping him catalog his collection in preparation for a move, picked up the coin and noticed the faint ghostly impression on the obverse and the dramatic rotation of the reverse that the family decided to have it properly evaluated. What followed that evaluation was a cascade of excitement through the numismatic community that has rarely been matched in the modern era. Word spread from the grading service to the major auction houses almost instantly, and within weeks of the coin's authentication being confirmed, inquiries were pouring in from collectors around the world, each one more aggressive than the last. The story hit the numismatic press, then the mainstream financial press, and then the broader media. And suddenly a coin that had spent the better part of 2 decades riding quietly in someone's wooden desk box was being discussed on morning news programs and in financial magazines as one of the most valuable objects of its size ever authenticated in the United States. The $163 million valuation placed on this coin reflects a market reality that has been building in the rare coin world for several decades now. The reality that truly unique error coins from the modern American series, especially those with impeccable preservation grades and airtight provenance documentation, have become objects of desire for a class of collector investor that approaches numismatics with the same financial seriousness and curatorial passion that others bring to fine art or vintage wine. For these buyers, the 1984 D-quarter is not simply a rare coin. It is a documented, authenticated, irreplaceable artifact of American industrial and cultural history, a physical record of a specific moment when the machinery of the United States Mint produced something that should never have existed, in that, because it did exist, because it survived, because it was recognized, now stands as one of the most remarkable objects in the entire canon of American collectibles. What makes the 1984 D-quarter story particularly resonant is the democratic quality of its origin. This is not a coin that was minted in limited quantities for collectors, not a proof issue or a commemorative struck with the intention of being preserved. It was made to be spent. It was supposed to disappear into the great circulating ocean of American commerce, indistinguishable from billions of other quarters, worth exactly 25 cents and nothing more. The fact that it survived, that it passed through so many hands without being destroyed or lost, that it eventually found its way to someone who had the habit of looking at its change carefully enough to notice that something was different. That is a story about luck and attention and the extraordinary persistence of hidden value. Right now, as you're watching this, there are almost certainly other 1984 D-quarters out there in the world carrying characteristics that approach what we've described today, sitting in change jars and coin rolls and old collections, waiting for someone with the knowledge and the curiosity to recognize them. The difference between finding one and missing one is nothing more than the habit of looking closely, of taking an extra moment with your change, of understanding what you're actually holding in your hand. The 1984 D-quarter dollar, valued at $163 million, is the ultimate proof that the greatest discoveries in numismatics are not made in vaults or auction rooms. They're made in kitchens and garages and yard sales and desk drawers by ordinary people who took the time to look. This is the coin that closes our story today, and it does so in the most powerful way possible. Not with a whisper, but with a declaration that the world of rare coins is alive, that the treasures are still out there, and that the next person to find one could be you. Thank you for staying with us all the way to the end of today's Legacy Coins journey. If this video moved you, if it made you want to go check your change right now, then hit that like button, subscribe so you never miss another story like this one. And share this with someone who needs to hear it, because somewhere out there, someone is about to find a fortune in their pocket, and it might as well be someone who watched this video.